All right, y'all. Welcome back to the channel. And tonight we have back on the channel Chuck DeLorante, and he is a fellow Texan, so obviously he holds a special place in my heart. But we wanted to talk about all this banking shenanigans, and there was a new announcement. This came out on the 11th about the Pentagon tries to cast bank runs as national security threat. And so what they've done, Chuck, is they've created a new branch within the Department of Defense, and it is called the Office of Strategic Capital. And this branch is so new that it's not even fully outlined. The Biden administration's pushing for like $115 million budget. I mean, hey, what's another 115 million, right? So,
Right.
yeah, so I figured since you're uh, in the financial realm and you're going to be talking to us tonight about banking and banking concepts, banking ideas, and how to take control of all of that, as the chicanery and the quantitative easing and the monetary spending, the drunken budgets and all these things and how they affect us. How do we take control of that? And that's why I wanted to have you back on to get your ideas on all of this and how you personally can take control of your own finances and what are some solutions and options that there are available. Welcome
Well,
back to the
thank
channel, Chuck.
All right. Glad to be back, TD, and hello out there to the audience. And yeah, we're going to go through this. So, what a prescient article came in the news today. We're going to have a private, public partnership of sorts, another government organization. And,
Yay.
and it does seem like it is. I mean, I guess you could say that since we have such a frail banking system, you could ask the question, what's the root cause? And is the solution to create another organization,
Mhm.
spend more tax dollars on a regulatory partnership, if you will, and to try to prevent what would be continual bailouts, I
Yeah.
suppose. So, and not to say, they're calling it a national security risk, I believe, because that probably opens up some of the legal part of it and puts them, somewhat in the, at least emotionally, psychologically, with the public in the driver's seat to kind of maybe come up with this new concept. But what it misses is it's just covering over the weaknesses of what is called the fractional reserve banking system and the Federal Reserve. And I don't know in your past programs how much you've talked about the quote unquote Fed, but
Yeah.
there's
Why
really
don't you run down what fractional reserve banking is and how it has changed and how it's kind of like actually non-existent right now? There is no such
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to work our way into that. So I
Okay.
thought I'd give a little bit of brief background on
Perfect.
why I'm where I'm at, and then I'll get into a little bit of an explanation. I've got some practical numbers to kind of go over for anybody that's not aware of what goes on with the mainstream banking system. But I came from sort of meager roots in the '60s and '70s. I grew up as a young kid and then a young man, and I went to college and did what people do and got degrees and all that. And I'm what they call a doctoral ABD. I did all my doctoral studies, all but dissertations. So I'm a, I only did that because somebody else paid for it. I was working for somebody that paid for my doctoral work. So I come at this. I'm not a scholar per se, but I appreciate learning, and I'm a lifelong learner, and that's what I urge people to do. So tonight, what
Amen.
I want to do is a little bit of this is more educational than
Great.
tactical, and I would love to talk with people about some how tos, and I'll allude to some options that are available to people
Great.
that they may not know about. But back to my life. So my grandparents never owned a home. My parents, unfortunately, did own a home, but got divorced late in life, and they lost their home. And I was newly married at the time, so I watched all that go down. And then there
Hmm.
was a bankruptcy. So I saw a lot of hardship through my young life and my early adult life. So I was very determined, and of course, like many in my age bracket, getting a corporate job, getting an education. We talked about on that on our other recent interview. I'm not anti-degree, obviously, in total, but I would say I'm more so today, not because it's bad to learn things, but for two reasons. What you learn ain't true. Number two, it costs you a pile of money to learn a bunch of lies and the
Yeah.
things that really miss the mark. So what we want to get behind is a little bit of the mystery of what's going on, perhaps to most people in the banking system. And so I actually started writing a book about what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight. And my working title is Run Before the Banks Do. So I thought it would be really apropos for some of the discussion tonight. So we've got to think differently, and so a lot about what I'm going to talk about is you've got to change your thinking. And so again, just like our educational background and the idea that you and myself and maybe others who are adults with families now, we all were given this mantra that you got to get a degree, you got to get out of got to go to college, and now of course if you go to some of the best colleges, maybe back in the day, there was some great opportunities. Today, I think some of the colleges are just so washed out and they're passing kids through, and then there's teaching all kinds of crazy ideas that we know they're
Yeah.
challenging to our Christian values and our Christian mindset. And that's no place to send a young Christian young lady or young man for sure. So, I got into my 20s and started working real hard, worked in corporate life, became an engineer, and then a manager of engineers, and then eventually got into consulting work. But as I kept going, it seemed like I just kept making more and more money, but I had more, I really didn't feel like I had anything left. I didn't feel like I was
Yeah.
gaining ground. And so I kept asking myself, okay, well, the landscape has changed. Back when my dad was working, they used to incentivize guys that had children in the tax code. And they do that a bit now, but it used to be more highly incentivized. I remember my father-in-law, who was about probably 8 years older than my dad, my wife's father, and he was World War II generation, and he would tell stories about how he didn't pay taxes for a long time because he had, as a family man, he had seven
Yep.
children. We had five children in our family, and things weren't quite maybe as lean and tough as my wife's family, but we both came from those kinds of hardworking backgrounds. But I thought the way out was to climb the corporate ladder, and of course you get into getting the paycheck, you get a bank account, you start running money through the bank account, and then all of a sudden you realize that anytime you need a loan, it's like going through a court case. If you've gotten a mortgage, or God forbid you want an unsecured loan, or you go, even if you're going to get a car loan, you've got to pull all this paperwork. Today with the '08 crash and all the regulation that came in with the various acts from Congress, maybe some were needed, but what's fundamentally wrong behind all this? So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that. So as sort of my story moved forward, and here I am later in life, and about 20 years ago, when I was doing some consulting work, I had the rare privilege of being sponsored by an executive that saw my work in consulting and loved what I did and helped me get going on a private consulting practice. And so for a while, I was really banging the dollars down, if you will, compared to what I was making in corporate life. And a guy came to me and he said, there's a way to store up this capital and have it available for investment and for family generational wealth transfer and all that kind of thing. And I saw it, here I am, MBA, allegedly an educated guy, but I kind of blew by it. And instead, I bought a vacation property, and that about sunk my boat, because just on the tail of that, sorry if you hear my dog barking, but I got a dog barking in the background downstairs. I'm up in my perch here. You can see my mounts behind me here.
Nice. Yeah. You sold the rental property.
Yeah, so I sold the rental property, and that was 10 years after this fella had approached me. And then this consulting business kind of softened, which added financial pressure to me. So I wound up having to go back on the road. I had a couple of guys working for me, but that work dried up. So I went back on as a single player, if you will, solo
Mhm.
act,
Okay.
to kind of keep things going, because I needed a sizable amount of cash flow.
Sure.
And so kind of roll that forward, after a number of things went on, and I moved to Nashville for a while.
Because
Came
how
back to
many
Texas.
kids do you have at this point?
Oh yeah. So when I went into consulting, I had 10, and then we had one more. We had a very late in life baby,
Was
and
that a
she's now
tax
my young.
strategy or?
Yeah, yeah. So we wound up having 11 in total. So we
Wow.
still have one at home. All my other ones are gone, married, or doing
Awesome.
something
That's
all over
great.
the country. So yeah, that's part of the backstory. So when you have a big family, you have to, in a single income, you have to be
Big cash
creative.
flow.
And
Yep.
I'm a
Right.
believer in multiple streams of income. We were counting
Yep.
last night. We actually have 7 streams of income right now.
That's great.
And so, I won't go through all that, maybe for another time, but it took me, a good part of my life to get all that going and get the
Mhm.
talent and skills and know-how, rental property and all that kind of thing.
I think that's a great point to maybe pause. And we get asked all the time with homesteading and with property accumulation, wealth accumulation, all these different things. Is like, yeah, but we're 24 or 28 years old, and we just got married 3 years ago. Hey, everything takes time. You
Yeah,
can't do everything overnight. And everything takes time. But what you're going to be discussing, I mean, it really is a change of thinking, a change of mindset. When you make that change, you've done the hard part. The rest will follow. The action will follow the mindset change.
right, right, right. Absolutely. And, I'll kind of break that down. So, what was interesting, you said a couple of things that brought back some memories for me. So one of the things that I like to say is, if you're going to plant a shade tree, today's the best day to do that, right? In
Yeah.
in 20 years or 15, depending on where you live, or 10, if you want shade over your back porch or wherever you're at, or out in the yard to set up a nice picnic area, you're not going to import that tree, maybe a palm tree in South Florida, maybe.
Yeah. And you're
And
going to pay buku bucks for
yeah,
it.
buku bucks. And
Yeah.
so if you're going to plant a tree, the best time and the most efficient way to do it is now,
Yeah.
especially for young people. So yeah, I mean, the message is that, all that I'm going to talk about, if I was to give you, maybe today's not the detailed day, but I can tell you the framework. But I'll tell you, in 2019, now rolling 10 more years forward, all these thoughts about what this guy told me in the year 2000, right after we went through Y2K, ironically,
Hmm.
he opened up this view to me. And then I started revisiting it in 2019. And due to the work of a guy named R. Nelson Nash, who's based out of Birmingham, Alabama, now deceased, he was 88 and died about 3 years ago. He came up with this very unique concept that's called the infinite banking concept, or IBC for short. And it's really based on a few principles. And the first one is think long term. Think long term. And I think we live in a culture that's a gratification now. We all experience that in every way. Whether it's, we have so much media available, we have so much product available. If I can't get it on Amazon by tomorrow afternoon, whatever.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that drive us all. So long term thinking is something that takes a little bit of stepping back from the noise. And the
Hmm.
noise that we have, back to our banking crisis, is, you asked me to explain fractional reserve banking. So in short, a bank takes your what's called demand deposits, and that's really a key word. We won't get into the technical reason of it, but basically, that the bank takes your money and loans it out up to 9 or 10 times. And so they pay you nothing to store
Yeah.
your money with them, and they leverage your money times 10. And so you wonder how a bank could fail. But because they're not, the system itself is rife for overambition and overextension, and it bloats itself because of human nature,
Hmm.
fallen nature, if you will, I believe. And left unattended, now there are some conservative local and regional banks run by probably pretty conservative people, but most other banks, and especially the big banks, as we now found out with SVP out of California and others, they're way overextended. And ironically, what a lot of people don't know, and I was doing research on this last week, that during COVID in March of 2020, they lifted the reserve requirements for banks to 0%. So
Mm.
they actually can loan all of your money out. And the way that factor of 9 or 10 gets is, they loan it out and then they loan that money out to somebody else as they pay it back. And it's
Yeah.
it's a cascading, basically a pyramid. You could call it a Ponzi scheme
Hmm.
of sorts.
Yeah.
So your money's not in the bank. And for some people, they think somehow their money's in a little box in the bank. But making money in the banking business is about money movement, and making money in what we're going to talk about, and that's private banking. We like to call it private family banking. The organization that I'm affiliated with, that's our trade name, Private Family Banking. And what we like to do is have money movement in that too. It's not about just stacking up dollars in an account somewhere. It's about what do you do with that money, and as it's sitting there in a savings mode, is it earning you any appreciable amount? And we'll talk about the power of compound interest as well. So, going back to fractional reserve banking, I mean, it may be that this whole move with the alleged bank crashes, now what seems to be a schema to prop them up through a governmental partnership. There may be hopefully more banks than what they call the big six. That'd be JP Morgan Chase, rather, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, and U.S. Bank Corp, and PNC Financial Services. Those are the six largest in the United States. And, it could be maybe one of those is going to swim hard and fast. But the bottom line is the whole underlying premise and the whole idea of the Federal Reserve and money printing, all these actions do is serve is to escalate the money supply, and it devalues the dollar. And, we know we don't have a dollar that's backed by anything. So it's like the perfect storm for bankers to do really well on our money. So the question is, how can you take over? And Nelson Nash used to call it this. He'd say, you need to own the banking function in your life. You need to get control of it, rather. And he said people should be in at least two businesses. That's the main business you do to earn revenue. And the second business you need to be in is the banking business. And the question is, how? The illusion is, and I don't want anybody to think you actually create a bank like you'd go to the regulatory body, because it takes about, depending on how much money you have and how many connections you have, it could take you 5, 10 or more years to create a bank with all of the regulation that's involved. And apparently in some states it's a little easier. You look in Texas, there's banks everywhere. There's every name of bank, and there's the dominant players as well. But the banking business is so lucrative, it's amazing that any one of them can crash. But greed happens, and all kinds of things happen. So there's some underlying structural reasons. But when you think about, if you can name the price of selling money, and you can take other people's money and sell it times 10x, and you can pressure people, and you can foreclose on them and take their assets and resell them, although they're not in the business of doing that. They definitely want you to pay interest for life.
Yeah.
So in private family banking, there's a method by which you can capture some of that interest and put it back towards you and not away from you. And that's another key concept. So, and then we like to say you need to be an honest banker when you set one of these up. And if you are borrowing some of your own money, which is possible in this methodology, you pay yourself interest back and then some. So, Nelson Nash used to liken it to a store owner that takes product out the back door and doesn't pay for it. You're really taking your own asset base and decreasing it. You're going to have to wind up selling more product on the front end. So that analogy kind of works when it's kind of explained. But so fractional reserve banking is not your friend. I'm kind of reading through the couple of chapters of my book here while we're talking. And the other thing that's a key concept is everything you purchase, you finance. And a lot of people go, what? I pay cash. Well, I understand the cash buyer, but what the cash buyer is leaving on the table is the opportunity cost of what they could have done with that capital had they kept it and found another way to store their capital, and then have basically your money at work in more than one place at a time. And that's the way you get leverage. Now, it's not perhaps as short-term powerful as the fractional reserve banking system, but I believe that's a really nasty, sort of unfair, and probably unbiblical system of weights and measures. So, but we have it, and it all goes back to the central banking schemes of the late 1800s and the early 1900s in our country, and the Morgans and Chase and all those people were involved, Loeb and several other key names, and they pressured. And if you look at bank crisis, we talked about this the other day, that this is nothing new. there's been
Right.
bank crisis since the 1800s, really going back to the 1700s in foreign countries. But if you look at the United States, starting in the late 1890s, all the way through the early part of the century, including the Great Depression, so-called, those were all uh, basically due to the banking system, and it
Yeah.
put pressure. It almost seems like it was rigged so that people would beg for a central banking
Yeah.
system.
That's right.
So, much like you could follow the children of Israel, and they wanted a king, they
That's
begged
right.
for a king, and they got
Yeah.
one.
Hey,
So if you
you
want
want
to put
one?
your
Here you go.
yeah, if you want to put yourself into slavery. So another key concept, and I'll get to kind of putting some labels on this whole thing, and maybe uh, talk about the structure for people to decide whether they want to know more or talk with me more. We can wrap that up at the end. But this I call is my my 2 cent challenge. And so this is a demonstration about the power of compound interest, and it's continuously compounded. And the problem with the stock market is you're making interest, or you're making a percentage of gain, if you will, in a stock, only to be taken away by the next crash, right?
Yeah.
Anybody that's
Correct.
been in a 401k plan over the last 20 years, since really since I think the 2000 was the last big crash, then 2008. It's a story of increase, fall, and recovery, right? It's a
Hmm.
sawtooth curve, up and down.
Yeah.
And if you do the simple math, if you lose 30%, I'll do it in my head, but basically, if you lose 30% of your portfolio, it's going to take 50 or 60% gain to get all that back, just to get back to zero
Correct.
base where you were. And so it's very devastating. And so people, I'm a believer that the Bible really doesn't give a justification for what we know as modern retirement. My
Hmm.
plan is to work as long as I can, add value, whether it's ministering to people or coaching people or consulting or whatever. I write a bit and also do some teaching on the side. I have, again, many multiple streams of income, because not only do I want to stay active, and I think it keeps me young minded, but I want to be up on what's going on. It keeps me alert, and it
Yeah.
also helps me to find ways to take the knowledge that I gain and monetize it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
and
good.
there's nothing wrong with that. Anybody, it's the love of money. The Bible doesn't say money itself is evil, right? It's
No,
the
you
love
can't
of money.
squander opportunity. If you're presented with opportunity and the Lord puts you in a position to take advantage of opportunity, the real crime and the theft and the sin is ignoring it, squandering it. I mean, you think of all the different parables about, the parable of the talent, and
Right,
about, you could have at least given it for usury, which we understand what the Bible teaches is about that, right? But no, you are
right.
supposed to invest it with the knowledge and the gifts that you're given, and invest it, and there's lots of great Jim Rohn talks about the
Yeah,
parable of the talents, and some really good analogies. They all got something, and they all had the opportunity to at least double it, and there's so much to teach our children there. There's so much to teach just young married couples that are trying to figure life out, that went to these government propaganda camps that's called the government school system,
right,
that's predicated upon no type of fiscal responsibility, no type of home economics, no type of general, it's a Prussian model designed to make you a
right.
cog in a machine so that you
Yeah,
can go work for the man, and he can oppress you basically, and you can be like a good little worker bee in the
right.
socialist fascist
Yeah,
model.
it's statism for sure.
Statism. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Frankfurt School too influenced
Yep.
our educational system. So from Germany.
A million
So
percent.
Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children." So
Yeah.
this is a long-term, multi-generational thinking model. And what I was going to get to, two things I skipped over, was that friend of mine, when I said it's like the best time to plant a shade tree, we were working together in the auto industry. I was an engineer. I worked for him, and he said he viewed his career as growing a tree. So he was in it for the long haul. He saw everything he did. Now I don't necessarily wasn't made the same way he was. We were totally
Hmm.
different people. We
Yeah.
enjoyed each other, but he was able to stay the course. I'm way more entrepreneurial. He was able to fit into that company man model, and he everything he did was about growing that tree that he had in his mind. His
Hmm.
outcome. And he's retired now, and I'm still working. But
Right.
anyway,
But
I don't know that he's
that old pension model used to work, and that
yeah.
old pension model is unsustainable now. It's
It
just not
is, it
realistic.
is. Defined benefit programs are all gone.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
only replace those by the slavery of
of the
the
stock market.
qualified plans where they urge
Mhm.
people to put their money in a 401k.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying if you get a pretty good match, you definitely certainly if you get a non-contributory. I currently work some W-2 work and I have a non-contributory. I'm going to take the money, but
sure.
I'm not going to
No,
put
you're
any of
right.
my money in the market,
Yeah,
and they're forcing you into these target funds anyway, so that's a whole nother
yeah.
discussion.
Mhm.
And they're probably bond based, but anyway, I think that the other point was that I was saying plant a tree was about compound interest. Compound interest takes time to gain its power, but if you draw if you math out, if you will, the curve, compound interest continuously compounded is an accelerating what we call an exponential curve.
Yeah.
It's going to climb really great after a few years, and so we design. I'll kind of get to the framework here, and so some of you might flinch in allergy, but you got to do the research. You got to look up infinite banking concept and understand the power of using a dividend paying whole life insurance policy as a warehouse for storing your capital, your cash, and then leveraging that money for investments by taking loans against it. So you never pull your money out because it's
Mhm.
continuously compounding. So what you have is a pot of money in the policy. You can loan against it and have that same money over here at the same time, fully earning on the inside and investing on the outside. For example, I took a loan on my policy to build an off grid home here that my son and his wife rent from us. We did it through the policy. I had enough in there
Right.
to do most of it. I mean, I did some out of my pocket, but um, it's a very powerful concept, and to the point of compounding interest and the fact that it's uninterrupted. So if I gave your son's not there tonight, but I think I made the challenge the other day. If I offered you TD $2 million cash right now, and I offered your son 2 cents, but I'm going to compound it every day. I'm going to double it every day for the next 30 days. Who would be the winner? And you find out just simple math. You take 2 cents and double it every day for 30 days, you're going to wind up over $10 million. So most
Yeah.
people would jump on the 2 million. That's a short-term thinking, not
Yeah.
the not to sniff at $2 million today, but just like lottery winners, if you don't have a plan, you're probably
Right.
going to
It's
squander the
gone.
$2 million.
Yeah.
That big inflow of money, quick riches, isn't necessarily what a lot of people need, and it can be a bad temptation. I'm not against capitalism by any means, but the fact that you could see, it's not a very realistic example in that no investment I know of is going to double unless you're in the banking business and you're a cheat or you're in
Uh-huh,
Wall
uh-huh.
Street. And I'm a firm believer that Wall Street is rigged. It's rigged for the insiders, and they're just playing
1,000,000%.
the ups and downs and the puts and the calls.
Yeah.
I think some of our mainstream politicians are into it. They know when the market's going to crash, they buy, and then they
Yeah.
sell at the peak of the market. They're given heads up so they get out before the damage is done. I think it's on record. Nancy Pelosi did that, by the way, many times for what that's worth, and
Yeah.
no doubt many others. So it's a kind of a sick bunch of interwoven people at high levels that are kind of controlling this thing. And so does the average man or even the more than average guy in terms of finances, do they have a way out? And this system of thinking can work for anybody. You have to not be afraid to capitalize. You have to be an honest banker. You have to think long term, and you have to understand how it all works and look for the opportunities as you I mean, it's not about just putting your money in one place and keeping it. You have to have money movement. So
Yeah.
um, that's a good bit about the background. And so, for example, especially for younger people, and I get some of your audience is likely in that position.
Yes, sir.
Uh, I want to urge these younger folks that you've got to, first of all, there was nothing wrong with good budgeting, right? I mean, I'm not a believer that paying cash for everything is really the best way to go. There's alternatives here that I just talked about, taking that cash, putting it in this holding tank, if you will, where it's going to earn continuously compounding interest. And then you have the opportunity to leverage that money back by borrowing it out and doing another investment. But there's nothing wrong with the good old basics of sitting down and really writing out what you're spending. I'm not
Yeah.
saying what you need, but what you actually do.
Yeah.
It's very
30
telling.
days, little notebook. write
Yep.
down every penny you spend for 30 days, put it,
Yep.
categorize it, and then I mean, you
Yeah,
don't
and
know
then you
until you
know
know.
and you see the patterns, and you get to ask yourself, "Why am I doing that?"
Mhm.
We we still do it. I mean, I took my wife out for coffee yesterday. We had one of those $4 latte things or whatever,
Yeah,
and but I don't like drive that to the extreme. I think
sure.
there's a time for refreshment, and definitely you don't want to tell your wife that you went out for coffee with the guys, but you're not going to buy her one. That wouldn't be a good
Right. Yeah,
idea.
of course. Yeah. Well,
But
and when you've been fiscally responsible and you've taken the steps and you have an active plan in place that you participate in every day, you can make exceptions. I mean, that's where
right,
it's just like with diet and exercise and cheat days, you can reward
right,
yourself as long as it's not a perpetual reward and
right,
as
right,
long as you're staying um you're holding true to the goals that you set and there's always room for um special treats and different things like that. We have to enjoy life. We can't be so rigid that, well, that's not on the schedule today, so we can't do that.
right, right. If you're homeschooling, you want a degree, and you have a degree of flexibility, and then maybe your
Yeah,
other problem is maybe having a little more structure and discipline. So
right.
it's
Yeah,
it's both ends of that.
it's a
But
balance. Yeah.
yeah, but my point there was, even if you looked at your coffee expenditures, if you're a coffee drinker, you'd ask yourself, could we cut this in half and still feel like we're
Hmm.
enjoying. And you say, well, yeah, okay, that's $20, but $20 here and there, $50 here and there, it all adds
So
up. So the first thing you've got to do is get control of the money coming into your life. I think the other thing that you want to do is try to build to have some other streams of income,
hmm.
and whatever talents you have. I'm not at all opposed for young men to have an extra job or do something on
Yeah,
Saturdays or whatever. And
yeah.
if you have boys, you can take them out. I mean, when my middle boys were still at home, and we lived in another part of Texas, I created a at your door car wash service, and I took the three boys. They were like 9, 10, and 12, and we walked the subdivisions. We temporarily lived in a subdivision. We're country people, but I was new in the area, and I rented a house for the first year we were in that area. And we would go around, and we had a waterless car wash. So we had a product that was a waterless car wash. So most of your cars in the subdivisions aren't very dirty; they're dusty,
Hmm. Hmm.
so it worked perfectly. So we didn't need any water, and there was water shortages, so there was water rationing, so they weren't getting their cars washed.
Hmm.
They weren't washing their own cars. So we went over with the waterless car wash, and we would wax it. We had a fee that beat the local drive-in places, the custom
Hmm.
places, and we cleaned up. I mean, we could go out and spend an entire Saturday washing cars, and we did that. And it was good money for the boys, and what they wanted. They wanted to buy what are those things called? Those paintball
Yeah,
guns, right?
yeah.
I said, well, if you're going to pay paintball guns, you're going to work for it.
That's
I'm not
right.
going to
Yeah.
buy you a paintball gun,
Hmm.
right? I wasn't against the paintball guns. I wanted them to earn it though.
Yeah, that's right.
And then years back, when all of my kids were home, we had a janitorial business. I was a middle executive working in the office during the week, and on the weekends we did two things. We raised hogs for selling
Uh-huh.
for pig roast,
Okay.
and I had a guy who had the roasters, and I used to take my pickup truck, swing by, get the roaster, take the hog to the slaughterhouse, pick it up, put it on ice, and deliver it to people for their hog roast, and charge handsomely for it. Go around the next Monday and pick up the roaster. The other
Uh-huh.
thing we did is we did janitorial work. I found a local real estate office, several of them, and we would go in at night, and my deal was everybody got an ice cream cone after we cleaned the office.
Hmm.
And we made, I don't know, $200 or $300 a week, but I'm talking, 25 or 30 years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah,
maybe longer. I can't remember what year it was. It had to be around 19, probably 95, 90, 96, somewhere in there. So that's, whatever years
yeah,
ago. But it was good money. It was good for the family. It created teamwork, camaraderie, and but what I was missing is a target for how to take this extra capital and channel it to a vehicle where it was stable. I wasn't going to lose money, so I tried playing in the market, and I
yeah.
lost my shirt. I didn't do it big time,
Hmm.
but I tried what most people do. I had a 401k. It seemed like as soon as I was up, I was back
Hmm.
down,
Yep.
and I could never ever seem to get ahead. And then all of those gains are taxable.
Yeah.
And the other thing about the private family banking model is all your gains are tax-free as long as you don't withdraw money in excess of what your base capital investment was, if your capital savings amount, rather, the amount you put in. But all the gains are not only not taxed for you, but when you pass that along, if you happen to pass away, the death benefit goes to your heirs, and that goes in tax-free. So they get it as long as you're not over $11 million for a single person. I think 22 million for a married couple. So most of us aren't probably have
Right.
to worry
That won't
about
happen.
estate
Yeah,
tax.
sure.
But my concern is, and I think it's a realistic thing, all these 401k packages, these 401k accounts, they're going to be a target for taxation
Yeah.
because Social Security is sideways.
Yeah.
They're living on borrowed time. There's going to be a glut of people retiring. We've aborted so many babies.
Yeah.
We don't have the backfill for
They
jobs.
floated it.
We were talking.
Yeah, they floated it
Yep.
under Obama administration, the MyRA. They basically said they were going to do it. There was backlash, but they will do it. I mean, it will happen.
They will do it. They have to. There's no other place to get it. So I think, after you're 59 and a half and you can get out without the penalty and just pay the income tax, I would say that's not a bad move.
Yeah, that's my
And
opinion.
get your money out of the market. If anything, get your money out of the stock market, because who knows where that's going to go with all this bank stuff going on and interest rates going up. And the sales market, home sales are going down. Builders are starting to
we know
shrink
it's
up. And we
going to
see this.
crash. It's wealth distribution. They crash it and buy it back in at the bottom, but you don't get to do that. You get to buy in when you're forced to, and you have to ride the crash out. They're not in on the crash, and they buy in at the bottom every time.
Right. And I'm a believer that if you can do it, if you can not send your wife out to work, if you're going to raise kids and homeschool them, your wife needs to be there.
I
I mean,
agree,
if you're going to do the flip role and you're going to be the house mommy as the dad, she's going to go to work. I don't think that's a great idea. I didn't want my wife out in the corporate world,
That's right.
quite frankly.
Me neither.
And my wife is smarter than me in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
She's
me
got
too.
street smart.
Yeah.
She had some college, but we decided way back when she was going to be home. We decided very early we were going to homeschool. And so for you to be a single income provider, you're going to have to get very smart.
Yeah.
And what you got to do is get control of the money that's coming to you and take advantage of starting to be a saver. There's three types of people. There's the spender, and they just spend money to get things. And then there's the investor who wants to make a killing in the market. And then there's the person that's the saver. And so what I like to say is you need to become a saver, but the question is how, where, and what do you save? So, I make no bones about it. I got into this in 2019 based on the experience I had 20 years earlier, because the model was somewhat there, but Nelson Nash expanded it. And when I saw the power of this thing, I jumped in with both feet. I put as much money in it as I could. And what it did, it has not only changed my thinking about money flow and the multiplication factor of the model of using the whole life policy for banking, but it changed my whole spending attitude.
Yeah.
And I didn't get cheap or super frugal or nasty. I just started to think about it differently. And you know what? Money started to congregate.
Yeah.
Money started to pull
That's
up, and
what
I
it does.
started to have more money than I ever knew. And that never happened in my entire working career. So something changed. Not to say I still have a decent job. I have side work. And as I said, 7 streams of income, some passive and some more active. But that is then a product of a lifetime. So back to your point about your young audience, there's no better time. In fact, it's much, much cheaper and affordable to get life insurance now than when you grow older.
Yeah.
And you have all those years to accumulate, because the multiplier comes in the years that you can put money into one of these devices, if you will, one of these containers, I like to call it. So covered a couple things. You got to get away from short-term thinking. You got to remember that money flows into your life, and you only have 2 sources for money. One is the money you work for, and the other is the work, that goes to work for you, money that goes to work for you, money that you work for, and then money that goes to work for you. It's unlikely that families with a single income are going to be able to do these things unless they get really smart and find a way.
Yeah.
And if you're giving your money to the banking system, you're allowing that entire system, which I would say to a degree, fractional reserve banking is just a crook's delight, if you will. And you're allowing somebody to use your hard-earned money, your capital resources, and control it, and tell you who they're going to lend it to, and tell you what you have to do to get any money from them
Yeah.
if you're going to go borrow money. And and again, the idea of planting a tree and pay attention to the government programs, question the reality. The government creates a problem. The government created this taxation
Yeah.
problem. You would agree, right?
Correct. A million
And then
percent.
they turn around and give you the 401k to help avoid the problem they created. To me,
Which is,
that's sort of
and that's just to kick the can down the road because they are going to tap that tree. And so, it's anytime the government gives you any kind of break or solution, there's always hooks attached to it. And yeah, and
absolutely
they always renege on their promises. So,
right.
and like you said, I mean, we know that the projections for Social Security and all these things are always collapsing, and printing money is not the solution. And oh yeah, but we need to keep everybody's votes. But eventually, you can only kick the can so far.
Absolutely. And Nelson Nash had another adage. He said that I mentioned that you finance everything that you purchase, and everybody kind of says, wrinkle their nose. What do you mean? Well, you're either paying interest or you're
Gaining
missing out
interest.
on that
Yeah.
opportunity cost. And so your money has to live somewhere. I mean, everybody has a pool of capital that's coming through your life. And so, can you imagine if you could unlock that control and get control over it, and then decide what you're going to do? It's a powerful concept. It's one that's not easily, I think it's more caught than taught. I mean, there is a lot of detail I could go through, but I think, sort of the beginning discussion is, would you like to know about a way that you can change and start to take control of banking function in your life? And I think that's a powerful question to
And
ask.
what I like
And
about it is
so,
the concepts are simple, they're easy to understand. They do require, some study and you pay attention, but they're very old concepts. They're basic, they're understandable, they're teachable, they're learnable. What always bothered me about crypto was this hard wallet, soft wallet, and tokens and passwords, and where you're
right,
gonna have to tattoo this thing on your forearm because if you ever lose
right,
it, your Bitcoin's gone and all this stuff. And I just switched laptops again yesterday, and all this password nonsense, it's all set up, and I don't want to get all conspiratorial about that, but
yeah,
I will tell you what, man, like
uh,
the 20 or 30 or 40 passwords sloshing around in my brain while you're trying to hold
uh,
like valuable thoughts and resources in there is
oh
just
yeah,
incredible. But what I appreciate about this concept is it's basic, it's understandable. And but what we say all the time on the channel: observe the masses and do the opposite. This is all part of
absolutely,
changing your thinking. You if you uh, you have to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. Everybody else is going to Starbucks. Everybody else is paycheck to paycheck. Everybody else is keeping up with the Joneses. And hi, Bob. Hi, Tom. Oh, nice new car, Bob. Did you mow your
yeah,
grass, Tom? And
yeah,
that's not sustainable. It doesn't work. Bob and Tom are both broke at a higher level. They don't. You're not impressing them. They don't care about you. They will get upset if you don't mow your lawn if you're in the neighborhood or whatever, but other than that, they don't even think about you, you know? And
absolutely,
this goes
no.
into this whole paradigm change. And so, uh, Chuck, if folks want to reach out to you and get some more information, what's the best point of contact for you?
Yeah, the best way would be my email, and that's Family Banking Now. So family and then banking and then NOW now, all one word. Family Banking Now at gmail.com. Just email me. I mean, I don't know if I want to put my number out over the internet and get a bunch of spam
Yeah,
calls, but
if you just have them email you, then you can correspond with them. That's probably
yeah,
the easiest way.
that'd be great. And this is an educational process. I covered a lot. I try to give some key concepts. It may be very foreign to you. Maybe some of you have had some exposure. That has to be properly set up. I just, as a matter of being upfront, I am a licensed life insurance agent in several states, so I can sell all over the country. If you're in a state where I'm not licensed, I can still get a license there in quick order and sell. I've sold policies coast to coast from Rhode Island to California to Texas and beyond. So um, it is a fun way to start getting control of the money that's coming your way and the future money that will. You got to think multi-generationally. So you can buy people. So if you're uninsurable or you've run out of income because you can buy them. It's called the value of life, or the value of a human life, if you will, in vernacular. So you can only buy so much life insurance on yourself. If you're doing very well, you can buy quite a bit. But even if you could imagine using this methodology your whole life, and then at the end of it, you've still had use of this big pot of money, and then you still pass along several $1,000,000 in most cases to your heirs, and then you train them to do the same thing. And you can buy policies on your children, your grandchildren, anybody who you have an insurable interest in. So just to kind of give you a concept, I've got 3 or 4 policies now myself, because I just started in 2019. But guys that have been in it for 10 or 15 years, they have 40, some have upwards to 60 policies going at once, meaning they're producing, and they've got an innovative on how to make money. And they don't just make it on selling insurance policies, but they get this thing so solidly, it's irresistible, because there's no better way for the average guy. And I could go into what banks do with it. They buy it on their senior executives. They own a lot of whole life insurance at the banking industry. And then my lighting's kind of moving away from me. It looks like I got a white beard on right now. Pretty funny the way that looks on my end anyway. But it's in very wealthy people can have another way and get involved. But for us sort of normal citizens, it's still, I think, the best game in town, and it's very doable. But you've got to have control of your money. You've got to plant that shade tree now, and you have to think about the generations forward, and then you have to look for great opportunities. The other key concept is, when you have capital or cash, opportunities will find you.
That's right. Every time. Yep.
If you're going out with your money hunting for opportunity, you've got the wrong idea. They will come to you. Once somebody knows you actually have liquidity is the key. That's what most people miss. They have their biggest asset is their home. And actually, a home is not an asset. It's a liability if you're not getting any revenue on it. Think about it. You co-own it with the local county, and you're taxed into perpetuity. You really never own your property. That goes back to property, back to England and everything else. We'll do that on another podcast.
Well, that's great. Well, hey, Chuck, I really appreciate your time. Appreciate a lot of the information. I hope it was helpful. I hope some folks learned some things. And for any of y'all that are interested, please reach out to Chuck, send him an email. He can get you more information. And I just really appreciate the time. And we'll have to pick up some other topics for other days and jump back on here. And I just really, me and Chuck, we have a lot of aligning core values with family and patriarchy, leadership, single incomes, large families. Chuck's beating me on that one right now. So I'm going to try to catch up with him, but I don't know.
Hey, man.
Everything's in God's timing. So, hey, really appreciate your time, Chuck. Thanks for coming on, and we'll see y'all on the next video. Thanks, guys.
God bless you all. Thanks, TD.
See y'all. Bye-bye.